Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. Today, we're addressing the alarming rise of AI-generated deepfake sexual abuse in schools with Evan Harris, president of Pathos Consulting Group. Evan brings both classroom and administrative experience to his work, helping independent schools develop policies and incident response plans for digital threats. With his master's from Teachers College and studies in tech ethics at Stanford, he's collaborated with NCII counsel, the Texas State Senate, and the Office of the First Lady on student protection initiatives in the age of AI. I'm so excited to have Evan here. He's going to share insights from his recent legal advisory for school leaders on preparing for, preventing, and responding to these incidents. Evan, welcome to the Dean's Roundtable. How are you today?
I'm doing so well. I'm so excited for this, Bridget. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, this topic is fascinating to me, and I feel like, it's like the blink of an eye, and things have just kind of sped up so fast. So I'm just going to jump right in and let's talk about the scope of the problem. Because recent data shows that 11% of students aged 9 to 17 admit they know classmates who are using AI to create fake nude images of other students, with an additional 10% refusing to respond to the question, how widespread do you really think this problem is? And what are the factors driving its rapid growth?
Yeah, so that stat comes from an organization called Thorn. They do really great research on this topic and a lot of other topics having to do with sexual abuse. A lot of the sort of AI tools that allow students to undress their female classmates, and I'll say female because they make up about 90% of the victims of this. A lot of these tools are relatively new. And as a result, I think we don't necessarily have the best data about exactly how widespread this is. But we have some indications that I think are pretty alarming. So the first one comes from RAIN and from the FBI crime statistics, and they're tracking year over year doubling of sextortion cases. These are cases where someone creates deepfake nudes of another person, or they have real and intimate images of another person, and they use those to extort that person either for sexual favor or financial gain. That's doubling every year. Presidium, who a lot of people in the independent school world are very aware of Presidium. Presidium does an annual report, and they've tracked a doubling of youth to youth incidents in their incident categories. They track different categories. The youth to youth incident category has doubled. And I think the adult to youth category getting smaller is a positive sign in some ways. I think we've gotten a lot more intentional and thoughtful about our hiring practices and screening people, better about training, but the youth to youth category is expanding. And then the last piece is kind of in the popular media and in the press, right? So we've seen a 60 Minutes report about this. We saw it come up at the State of the Union. The hit show Adolescence covers some of this. And so it's people are aware of it now, and parents are aware of it now, and they're starting to ask, what are schools doing to prevent this? You asked an interesting question, which is what do we attribute this uptick? Yeah. I think, and we could do a whole hour just on this. And I just bought a bunch of books on the topic to start learning more myself. But we have a boy problem. I think we have to call it what it is. We have a boy problem. They are roughly 90 to 95% of the perpetrators. And so, when you look at, and this is something we can talk about later too, but look at their attitudes towards feminism. A huge percentage of them, something like 70%, see feminism as discriminating towards men. It's not what feminism is, not at all. And a huge percentage of them have really positive attitudes and a high level of trust toward influencers like Andrew Tate. And so there is, I think, an epidemic of loneliness and boys falling down these kind of internet rabbit holes. There are also some structural issues, I think, in the way that we educate boys. I saw a stat that said something like, 2% of early childhood educators
Mm-hmm.
are, I think it's like 2% of kindergarten teachers are men or something like this. They make up, I think, something like 23% of high school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to wonder, like, well, what message do we send with that?
Right.
There are studies that show that having a male English teacher, for example, which is one of the areas where girls starting in middle school start to do much better than boys, having a male English teacher starts to make up that gap. It doesn't hurt the girls, but it helps the boys a lot. And so I think there are these hidden structural issues that we have to look at. You know, for a long time, we talked about girls in STEM and have made a ton of progress there. But where the conversation about boys in the humanities has been so missing from the discourse.
That's not something that I've really thought about until you mentioned it. And so you're absolutely right. And you think about that statistic in terms of 90% of the victims are women. What are we saying to our boys? And when are we saying it? When is this conversation starting? Because I feel like there's also some controversy there about when we start having these conversations with students. And if we aren't getting it early, I think, the toothpaste is out of the tube, for lack of a better term. And it's hard to kind of change or shape their idea of what's healthy and what's normal and what's right if we don't combat it early.
That's absolutely right.
And so, do you have some idea? Are schools, from your purview, are they starting to have these conversations earlier? And how are they having these conversations? Because we also haven't, the mental health and the disciplinary piece. We haven't even kind of dove into that, which we will in a second. But are schools having proactive conversations? What do you think schools are doing right now? Have you heard about things that or how schools are handling it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's like everything with our education system, where it's two tiers, right, or more, right? And so really good schools are doing amazing things on this. The push toward like more social emotional learning and giving boys kind of the language, the toolkit, the skills to talk about what's going on with them, right? I think it's really hard to have a girlfriend if you don't know how to have a friend. And it's and that's not that all boys want girlfriends, but generally it's really hard to have a boyfriend too, right? So I think like having some sense of like the idea, I heard this earlier this morning, that making friends with someone requires like a certain level of vulnerability.
It does.
Like you can talk about sports all day long, but things are going to remain kind of surface level if at no point are you able to kind of be vulnerable. And if you don't have the toolkit or the language to do that, it's going to be tricky. In terms of what's working or what I've seen work kind of anecdotally, I actually used to run a program here in Texas. We ran it with about 1,000 15-year-olds. And it was all about civil discourse. And as part of that, we had to give them these soft skills. And I started noticing that when boys were cued to do things like active listening and have these empathy exercises they were expected to do, they understood even at 15 that this was coded in a way that was not for them. And so I think part of what we have to do is meet them where they are. And so the following year, when I iterated on the program, I reframed some of the lessons as we're going to teach you how to be really good salespeople or really good negotiators. These are things that are coded completely differently for boys.
Completely different.
It was the same curriculum. It was just reframed, but the boys were so much more into it. So I think like this idea that we're going to be able to force them to act in a way that doesn't feel cool or normal, like why are we putting like a square into like a circular hole? Like it just doesn't make sense. We have to meet them where they are, because the fact is, like, the Andrew Tates of the world, as disgusting as they are very good at selling these ideas to these boys. And so if we don't understand that we have like a sales job that we have to do, I think we're just going to be kind of like falling way behind on this.
I think we've already fallen behind, in my opinion, and because it's just come so quickly. I feel like you get your arms around one thing. It's like whack-a-mole. You think, like, all right, we're tackling the AI in the academics realm, and we're making strides there, and everyone's starting to feel comfortable about how to use AI in the classroom, and then you've got this piece, and you're like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. It's another rabbit hole that you actually have to go down, because if you look at the statistics and you talked about, mental health and like how the cases are doubling and minors are dying by suicide because of this. Like, we can't just hope that it goes away. We have to equip schools, but we have to equip the adults in the schools to be able to kind of have these conversations with students to talk about this issue on a real level and not some kind of surface like you probably shouldn't do this. You've got to go deeper than that. We've got to be better than that, because otherwise, we who are we how are we supporting our students and our youth coming to be adults in this society now? What are their values? What are they gonna feel is important? And it's not, obviously, parents have a huge part in this,
They do.
but students spend 8 hours a day in school, right? And so if we're not having these conversations and we're not wrestling with this with them, then we're not modeling the behavior that we want them to have. And
That's exactly right. Yeah.
so, um, so let's talk about the legal landscape for a bit, because I feel like now that there's some things that are out there that could be helpful for schools. And,
Yeah.
back in the day, I feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this. When I was a dean, that, there was a lot of kind of angst around just even uncompromising photos that would, come across our office, and how we could handle those, and being careful that we didn't put anything on our devices, because that could be misconstrued as, peddling child pornography. And so we have to be really, one, strategic, but also know the rules about how you should be handling these things. So what's happening on the legal side of things, and how are schools or what should schools know about that?
Sure. So, one of the things that I hear from schools often when they opt not to do this work is they'll say like, oh, well, we don't know actually how prevalent this is. We don't think this is going to happen here. And so we've kind of covered that side. It is increasingly prevalent. You've got to cover it. But the other objection I sometimes hear is, well, we know how to handle sexual abuse, and so therefore we know how to handle this. The problem with that is that there are so many ways in which these cases are totally distinct. You highlighted one of them, or two of them actually, which is the evidence handling and the law. They're distinct laws. Just this week, the House passed the Senate's Take It Down Act. And so the Take It Down Act is now a federal law. It criminalizes the creation, distribution, or threat to create or distribute a non-consensual image, deepfake or real. The problem was that previously we had a patchwork of state level legislation. I think something like 20 to 30 states had their own laws.
Wow.
New Jersey passed one a couple of weeks ago. Pennsylvania had a pretty good one. Texas had a pretty good one. But if you were a kid living in a state that didn't have that, it meant that you didn't have civil recourse potentially, that the perpetrators might not face serious consequences in some cases. So or that the financial burden was higher because you would have to, seek some kind of, justice through other laws, like laws for fraud or for trafficking or for coercion, or there's sort of a patchwork of other laws that applied, but it was hard. Yep. So the Take It Down Act does a couple things that are really positive. So one of them is it requires social media platforms to comply with takedown orders, reasonable takedown orders of non-consensual intimate images within 48 hours.
Okay.
So that really matters for a victim, because if you talk to a victim of this type of sexual abuse, what they'll tell you is that not only is it very, very hard to get these social media sites to comply or to even answer their request,
right,
but they live in perpetual fear that the images will resurface.
Sure.
Right. And so it's never really over. And they worry that they didn't get them all, and that a future employer is going to see it, or their college they apply to is going to see it. And that extra kind of anxiety and turmoil adds on to everything else that they're dealing with: the academic disruption, the social emotional disruption, the reputational, all of it, and the financial. So it helps with the takedown orders. It allows them to take the perpetrator to civil court. Which is important. It again criminalizes this behavior. So if you have, and even for minors, so if you have, a junior in high school who creates a non-consensual deepfake image of a classmate, they may have just committed a felony. right?
Wow.
And so this, I think, adds to the level of seriousness that schools have to proceed with here. So all those things are really, really important.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll add on the legal landscape side that's important is, and I'm not a lawyer, most educators are not lawyers, but we have to have some baseline knowledge for the law. We just do.
Yeah.
And so what we have to understand is that this federal law creates like a floor. This is a foundation that applies to every state.
Everyone.
But your state law may add on top of that. It can't
Okay.
detract from it, but it can add to it. And so you still do have to be aware of what your state laws are and what your mandatory reporting requirements are, because they vary by state in terms of the time frame, like who you report to. In some places, it's like the Department of Human Services or Child Protective Services or Department of Health and Family Services. It's different by state. They have all kinds of different requirements. But certain things are universal across states for mandatory reporting.
So, a couple of things I want to do now. The first thing I want to do, because you talked about non-consensual intimate image. Do people say NCII? Do they? How are they? Is that how they're referring to it? Because that was a new acronym for me. I hadn't heard it before. So people are saying NCII.
It's become the term because it's what like the FBI uses to track these. It's what you would Google to learn more from resources like RAIN or NCMEC, which do fantastic work on this. So NCII is what you would want to Google. It's become like the term of art. It's a weird way to put it, but like it's the standard.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. And so what I want to do now is just kind of walk through what you need to think about as a school leader, whether you're dean of students or it's kind of kicked up to the, assistant head or head of school. And like, let's just kind of go through some steps. So what specific steps should a head of school take in the first 24 hours or dean of students in the first 24 hours after learning of a deepfake NCII?
Sure. So the first one is to establish a reasonable suspicion that this has occurred, right?
Okay.
That's all you need to justify mandatory reporting. Some schools make the mistake of thinking, well, we have to complete our investigation before we can report. Nope. As soon as you have reasonable suspicion, you should report immediately. That starts a different track. It starts a different investigation that's going to happen somewhere else with other people that you'll support, but is not your responsibility. Your responsibility are your kind of in-school consequences and helping the victim. That's top of mind, is helping the victim.
Yes.
I would start with getting this reasonable suspicion. If you do have a crisis management team and a protocol set up, one of the first things I do with schools is we just define the crisis. What is it? What is the threshold to say this has occurred? And now our protocol kicks into gear. And these are the steps we follow. And with that protocol, you have a definition of roles and responsibilities. You have kind of an order of operations. You have literally like a checklist and communication channels set up. You might even have templates for crisis communications because you can kind of guess the sort of questions you might get if parents start calling. All that work can be done ahead of time. So you get that reasonable suspicion, that initial fact collection. I would not notify. There are a couple order of operations pieces here that matter really early. I would not, and some of them may seem very obvious, but then again, we see schools make these mistakes all the time. So what seems obvious when we're having a casual, calm conversation in the heat of the moment might fly out the window.
Right.
So it's important to kind of establish them. So one thing I would say is do not notify the victim before you've notified their parent or guardian. The reason being, they might, if they're a day student, they might want to be there to help them, through that moment. And what is the first thing that victim is going to do after you notify them? They're going to call their parents, right? And so you want to be the one saying, this is what's occurred.
Is what happened, right?
These are the steps we've already taken. This is what's going to happen next. Would you like to come onto campus? Like you want to manage that moment, right? You don't want to put that on the child.
You want to control the narrative, so to speak.
Sure. And then the victim notification also really, really matters. At a school in New Jersey, I talk about this a lot. They read her name out over the school's intercom, right?
Gosh.
And at that moment, rumors were already swirling. The students already knew kind of what was going on. So when she got called to the head office, every kid in school knew why she was called. And so from the very beginning, they are already adding to her shame, her anxiety, her isolation, all of it. They're adding to it. They're not helping. They're making it worse. And so the discretion matters a ton here. Bless you.
Thank you.
At a lot of schools, they show more discretion toward the perpetrators than they do the victim.
Then they do the victim.
Super common. If the parents want to know, for example, the names of the students who did this, don't want to share that with them. But one of the reasons I would recommend reporting to both CPS and to local law enforcement is that local law enforcement can help you with evidence collection, which we can talk about. But that also gives you the name of the investigating officer, which you can then share with the family. And that's not about passing the buck, but it is about, protecting everybody. Right.
Absolutely. And so you just mentioned evidence handling, that's a big one. And so I don't think, before it was like, you can't really handle this evidence because then you could be charged with something as well. So talk a little bit about evidence handling. And has anything changed with these new laws, and what are the proper protocols?
Yes. So I'm glad you brought this up. So the Take It Down Act does include kind of a safeguard for school employees who are preserving evidence in good faith in order to give it to law enforcement. Okay. What we've seen in the past are two big mistakes when it comes to evidence handling. And you can totally, again, these are things that in the moment in this conversation are going to sound so dumb, but they've happened. And they happen in the heat of the moment when people aren't thinking clearly. So one of the really common ones is someone gets pulled into their class dean's office, let's say, and they say, this was so stupid. This was terrible. How could you? You delete those images right now. They just deleted evidence of a crime.
No.
But in that moment, that thing of like, you delete those images, that feels like the right thing to do.
Right thing to do.
Like, dude, no, this is now like a federal crime this kid has just committed. Like, absolutely not. Do not destroy that. Small little pro tip, by the way, if you confiscate a phone, place it in airplane mode, because we've also seen students try to remotely delete evidence, and even parents try to remotely delete evidence. And that's actually actually not that shocking, because we know how crazy parents can get when they're trying to protect their kids. So, and then the second thing is, okay, no, we need to preserve everything. So let's take a photo of the photo with our cameras. Let's store it on a secure server at the school. We'll write down the date and time. That also, in the heat of the moment, might sound like the right thing to do. Okay, we're going to preserve the evidence. We're going to use our devices to make sure we're preserving the evidence of a crime. Up until the Take It Down Act, this was a really bad idea. And there was actually an administrator in Colorado who was charged with child exploitation for improperly storing the evidence of someone else creating these images. Right. And so we want to be really, really careful about this. I would recommend, even though the law protects you, because it's so early and because we're not trained in digital forensics, that's not our job as educators. We don't know anything about this. Ask law enforcement's advice. It's another reason to report to both CPS and to law enforcement, is that you can ask them for their advice about digital forensics and handling of evidence. I would even recommend calling law enforcement before an incident occurs to let them know you're thinking actively about this, to find out if they're doing any specialized training on it, to ask them what their best advice would be, and to form that relationship early. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
I think that's great.
So I would defer to that. And the very last piece of this, for independent schools, we are not thinking about the Fourth Amendment the way that a public school is. We're thinking primarily about the language in our handbook, because when we get sued, it's usually because of negligence or because of breach of contract. Those are the two things that get independent schools in trouble. And so you want to be really careful about following the language in your own handbook. But for most schools, I would say that if a search is not arbitrary or capricious and it is done in the best interest of the institution, you are legally in pretty safe territory, telling a student, open up your phone, we're going to see if this image is really in the group chat, it was alleged.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about what to do in terms of mandatory reporting and how you handle evidence. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit, especially because this podcast is called the Dean's Roundtable, is talking about the discipline piece and how, the discipline is important. It's a thing that we have to kind of figure out, but also, there's a discipline and then there's a support moving forward, because the perpetrator needs to be disciplined, but the victim also, we need to care for the victim. And so how do we balance both of those things and how have you seen schools kind of manage this piece? Because there needs to be kind of education, there needs to be a consequence, a response, but there also needs to be support and make sure that, students are making better choices moving forward, because that's the whole idea, right? We're not
Yeah,
just saying this
100%.
is the end of your life and like go away. We want to make sure that we're providing a space for kids to learn and grow. We provide consequences that are appropriate, and that we actually have some learning from this as well, so that students make better choices. So, what are you seeing there?
Well, so with regard to perpetrator consequences, there are a couple things that I would say. And again, every school is going to make kind of their own determination based
Sure.
on their mission and values and how they handle things. But here are maybe a couple of things to think about. I would not make any kind of, I would create some equivalencies because I think they're clarifying. I'd create an equivalency between creating the image and distributing it. And I'd create an equivalency between real and fake images. Like
Okay.
just the Take It Down Act has what's called like a reasonable person standard for NCII. In other words, if you looked at the image, would a reasonable person think it could be real?
Got
Right?
it.
If like, if I Photoshop Donald Trump's head onto a bikini model, no one thinks that that's real, right? And so that's satire, that's a joke, right? And so you have to have like some reasonable way of deciding like, well, what is real and what's like not, like, right? So that's an important piece. I would say that if a student has committed a felony in sexually abusing another student on your campus, that the result of that should probably be expulsion.
Fair enough.
And I would also say that once you like verify that this has occurred, especially if you see it like on their phone, like they should probably be suspended while that process is working its way through. The reason that I think that is that a victim should not be forced to share a space with the person that's abused them, specifically like a classroom space where their objective there is to be educated and to learn. And if you disrupt that, you are depriving them of a right.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's how I would think of it.
Okay.
With that said, this gets messy really quickly. I had someone ask yesterday they said, I teach at a boarding school. We have international students. If the perpetrator is from Vietnam, let's say, how do you suspend a student for 4 days who's from, somewhere 6,000 miles away?
Right.
And so there are all kinds of ways in which this gets tricky.
It does.
But I don't want to sound overly draconian or punitive. I do think there's a lot of work that can be done before an incident to educate, to do all kinds of preventative measures, and to educate not just students, but parents and staff. There's a lot of work to do on consent and healthy relationships and media literacy. A lot of students make bad decisions because they don't fully understand the consequences or because they're acting impulsively.
Right.
And so to the degree that we can give them like more information about just how harmful this is and give them a moment of pause before they act, that's really helpful. And then the last part of your question was about the supports. What do victims need? And the place I always start, I have some videos that I show of victims and their families telling their story.
Okay.
And the reason I show those to crisis management teams is I want to start from the victim experience and then kind of reverse engineer what is it this person needs, because the harms to this are so varied. It's like I said, academic, social, emotional, reputational, legal issues, financial issues. They're dealing with a lot all at the same time. And most times when this happens, the parents are just as like flat-footed. They never like, what happened? I've never heard of this. A lot of them.
Yeah.
And so I think, for example, I would include a mental health counselor in the crisis management process of like building these policies and protocols. I can include them in the conversation from the very beginning, someone who's trauma informed. If you don't have a trauma informed counselor on campus, look one up in your local area so you can make that referral if it's appropriate for that student. Show that student a lot of grace academically. The teachers don't need to know the specifics of what happened, but teachers are used to, hey, something serious has happened. We'd like you to like work with this student and show a lot of grace for the next couple of weeks, right?
Sure.
Like we're used to that. We know what that means. And so I think this is one of the best things that schools can do in their planning in their communication with parents when they first bring them in to explain what happens, is also here's what's gonna happen next, and we've already thought really carefully about like what all these different supports, and here it is, because we've already like done this work. Like that's, I think, an important piece to have ready, because we know this, and I'm sure dean of students who are listening know this. When parents contact you really angry, a lot of the anger is fear.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the fear is, how am I going to protect my child, and what's going to happen next? Our brains are prediction machines. And so if you can make the next little bit of time feel more predictable and more solid and steady, that matters. And then literally the very last thing I'll say is ask them what they need. They have just been robbed of agency and choice. Put them in the driver's seat a little bit and ask them, what can we do for you? What do you need? On top of these things we've just outlined, is there anything else we can do? So giving them like a little bit of say and control in a moment where they have none actually matters a lot.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I think that's great. All good pieces of information. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, because we haven't talked about the insurance and liability of this, which is also, things that schools have to contend with. And so, we talked about the doubling of the number of deepfake incidents we have out there, and youth use sex abuse incidents have also doubled from 2015 and 2024, and so average payouts increasing 200% in terms of these cases, and with insurance. So what insurance considerations should CFOs and school leaders be addressing to try and mitigate some of this financial risk?
Sure. So, and some of this changes based on who the perpetrator is, because one thing we haven't touched on is adult to youth.
No, we haven't at all. That's, oh my gosh.
Like that just happened a couple of weeks ago in Mississippi. Where there was an adult working at the school who's making these images of, I think, 8th graders at the school. So that changes the type of insurance that the kind of claim you might be making, and also who you have to report to. In a lot of states, you then have to report to like the State Board of Education, for example. I used to work at an Episcopal school where you might have to also report to the diocese. So like it's over-report. Like let people know. There's no harm in reporting quickly once you have reasonable suspicion, and then letting these different people know. And for a lot of insurance policies, in order to remain compliant with that policy, you actually have to notify them within like a set time frame. So that's really good practice too. One small tip I would give schools when it comes to insurers, and also this ends up mattering when it comes to crisis communications as well. I would consider, if you put language in your handbook for this, for example, having students and parents maybe sign an acknowledgement that they've read it. Not a bad idea, because then no one can claim ignorance to this. And like that could end up mattering, because part of what you're going to try to communicate after a crisis is, we've already been taking this issue really seriously. We were prepared for something like this. This is what we did to prevent it. Even with all those measures taken, an incident still occurred, but this is how we've acted to protect the victim and to support their family, and to rebuild trust within the community, because you have these like second and third order effects of something like this, where it doesn't just affect the victim and their family, it affects them primarily, but you then also have this kind of chilling effect community wide, because all of a sudden, like this, when it happened in Pennsylvania, there was an all school walkout. 200 kids walked out of class. Because they were so angry at the way it had been handled. So I think really important to think backwards, and not in a cynical way, but think backwards from what would you like to be able to say in a crisis communication to your entire community about what you did before this and how you handled it. And what kind of templates can you have in place beforehand?
Planning ahead is so important. We can't plan for every situation that we come across, but we can certainly prepare ourselves in terms of, the structure of the crisis management team, policies and procedures are how we operate, at least a general framework, so that you're not building the plane while flying it, because it always presents problems. And so while you feel like you might not want to deal with this, it's here. So take this time, during the summertime to think about these things. things in the absence of students being on your campus, so that you can really have some real plans in place and actually know kind of also the chain of command. Who's doing what? Who's making the calls? Who's doing the mandatory reporting? Who's handling the evidence? Who is working with the families? Where is the health center involved in here? Do you have a trauma-informed person that you have either on your campus that you can reach out to? Find someone over the summer so you're not looking for these pieces in the moment. I think is so important. And so, but also thinking about the training and of your staff and what information you want to give to them, and parents. What information do you want to put out to them as well? And having updates to your handbook. We talk about that also, thinking about all the pieces ahead of time and not on the fly is super important. So just wanted to kind of recap that. So as we look ahead and think about, future trends and, AI technology continues to advance. What other emerging threats should school leaders be preparing for? I'm like, gosh, if this isn't enough,
I
we
was
got to
gonna
be
say,
looking ahead. Geez.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still fighting the battles from like 10 years ago. Like, we still haven't figured out really. I mean, a lot of schools are going phone free now, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like, it took us a long time to figure that one out. And in retrospect, is going to seem very obvious. Right. And so, that feeling I hear from heads all the time, which is just, man, it is one thing after another. One thing we didn't really touch on, but I think is important just as like a small note, is because it's one thing after another. And it feels, especially I think to classroom teachers, like every year we say, hey, can you solve this massive systemic societal problem? Like, like right after you teach like the rules for commas, it would be great if you could solve this other stuff. Right. And we never take anything off anybody's plate. I mean, this is like, everyone's heard this speech that I'm giving right now. But the thing is, like, we don't necessarily think about like taking care of the caretakers.
Right.
And so one part of a crisis management plan that I think is really important is in the aftermath of this, which can be really stressful and really taxing on all the people that are doing their jobs. What kind of like help do they need? Right. And that's not touching on your question of kind of like what's coming up next.
That's okay though, but I do want to, I do,
important.
that's important because the debrief, we don't talk about the debrief enough. And so it's a debrief to kind of talk about how things went, but also what do you need as someone who had to kind of manage this situation? It's hard for the adults who are having to deal with this, all because they're dealing with everyone. They're dealing with the victims and the perpetrators and both sets of families. That's a lot of stress to put on a small group of people. And so to talk about how you're doing, what you need, what went well, what do we need to do differently, what are we learning from this? Oftentimes we feel like we're exhausted, we just feel good about checking it off like we're done, and we don't revisit. And so I do think it's super important that we revisit. And so even before we go back to kind of what's new and on the horizon, let's talk about policy development a little bit in terms of AI-generated deepfakes at NCII. Acceptable use policies, is that where it goes? Like, is it separate? Like, is it all social media? Like, where is that land?
Yeah, like where does the policy live in the handbook? Like what?
Yeah, what category? Where do you put that?
I would put it alongside your rules for sexual abuse.
Okay.
Because it is a form of sexual abuse. You are placing it alongside the thing it is most like. And so I think if you were to place it, and it's, ultimately like even just having explicit language in your handbook puts you in the top 1% of independent schools at the moment.
Gotcha.
Most of them have not done this. So that's already great. So I'm not going to bully a school for putting it in a different section of the handbook.
Fair enough.
But I do think if you put it kind of in the like AI acceptable use section of the tech section, it's kind of, the message is sort of that this is a tech issue when this is a sexual violence issue. And so I think it belongs there because your message is we see an equivalency between real and deepfake images.
Right.
And what was really clarifying for me, if anyone kind of bristles at like, well, real images versus deepfakes, we really want to treat them the same. The thing that was super clarifying for me was hearing the stories from victims and realizing we have to treat them the same because the victim experience is so similar.
You're right.
It's so similar. So like, like that's why we have to treat it with this similar kind of urgency. And now the legal ramifications are so similar. This is now a felony,
Yeah.
right? So like it belongs there, I think.
Gotcha.
But I'm happy to talk about language or pieces of that policy that should be in place if that's helpful. I don't know if that.
Yeah, so I guess what specific language schools need to make sure that they have in the handbook, I think is probably a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. So I would explicitly ban the creation, distribution, or threat to create or distribute real or deepfake non-consensual image, right?
Okay.
The threat part really matters, and it gets left
Okay.
out sometimes, but that's the sextortion piece. Someone could be extorted or coerced with an image that hasn't been made yet because it's the threat to do these things unless they do something else. And an important note, actually, along those same lines, they've found at RAIN a correlation between in-person abuse and like digital sexual abuse of this kind, like sextortion or deepfakes. So one of the things that schools should be aware of when they run across an incident like this is this the only way in which this victim has been abused, or is this part of something bigger? So just like to have that in the back of their heads, like as a question to ask and something to like be aware of, that the two are correlated. Gotcha. In terms of like specific language, I would use broad tech neutral language because it's changing so rapidly, right? And the tools that get used and like what form this takes is just moving so fast. It's hard with AI policy because you feel like you might have to update it every year, but you want to be kind of broad and tech neutral. Yeah. And with any kind of policy language, it's a best practice to be kind of broad in kind of the spirit of the rule, but then list maybe some specific examples to clarify that rule. You're kind of straddling both. That's what you want to do with policy, is be broad enough that you can capture things that maybe aren't an exact fit, but clearly are a violation of the spirit, but then not be so broad and so vague that no one really knows what the rule is. You do want to put like some examples to clarify like what actually it is you're talking about. Got it. One other thing that's important, and it may or may not belong in this section, but I think it's important. To minors, I got asked this yesterday on a webinar. Someone said, "What about consensual images? Like, what about that?" And that totally like threw me for a loop because I never get that question. But to minors, like sending each other nudes of each other, which, they're teenagers, that's going to happen. That actually is a reportable event. Like that triggers a mandatory reporting, even if it's consensual, even if they're both sending each other these images. That's a form of what's called CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. But states have statutes in place that really minimize like the penalties for this, but it is technically a reportable incident. And I had to like double check that because having worked in a high school, like, these kids texting each other. Like of course this is happening all the time. It's pretty darn prevalent. And so, it can be tempting to not think of that as serious. But it is still a mandatory reporting requirement for that. So I just thought to like mention that.
No, I think that's so important, because the mandatory reporting piece, people, I think I used the rule of thumb when I was a dean, like just give them a call. Like, it's worse to not. It's better to have kind of erred on that side of caution and call them and say, I have this incident. Should I be, reporting this? And they will give you some guidance there. And so you don't want to get caught where you just assume that you didn't have to. Yes. I'd rather be on the other side of that. So
better safe than sorry.
Absolutely better.
There is one last little piece of policy language I'd include. Which is that consent to create an image is not the same thing as consent to distribute it. So that's another little loophole where, and I know that sounds crazy. Like, who would consent to having a deepfake nude made of them? I heard this story. I bristle at having to tell this story because it's so dark and strange. But I heard this from the guy who's in charge of safety at Snapchat.
Okay.
There was a school somewhere on the East Coast, I forget what state, where the school became aware of deepfake nudes that were being made of girls because a girl came in to complain And what she
Okay.
was complaining about was not that someone had made a deepfake nude of her, but
Mm-hmm.
that someone was making deep nudes of her friends and was excluding her. And she was angry that
No.
she was being left out. And that's how the school became aware of the incident. So
Wow.
this gets weird
Wow.
very quickly. And that's part of the thing with like why when we do these tabletop exercises, we make the scenarios as generic as possible, because we want to plan for like the most general, most obvious, most likely scenarios, so that when you get really strange things that can only kind of happen among high school kids,
Right.
that you can deal with those extraneous like outlier incidents because you've covered kind of like the main
The
pieces.
kind of main basics, the
Yeah.
mainstream. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I was not ready for that one. So that's definitely
Neither
an
was
interesting
I.
thing
Yeah.
to be thinking about. So two things I want to talk about as we wrap up. We want to go back to future trends, but we also want to talk about community education. So I don't know which one you want to dive into first, but totally up to you.
Yeah, let's do future trends.
Okay.
So I'll highlight one in particular that I think is not quite here yet, but is coming. It's
Okay.
kind of inevitable. It doesn't have to do with deepfake sexual abuse. And as you can imagine, I kind of love any opportunity to not talk about this.
Fair enough.
It's exhausting. I start a lot of conference talks, and I probably shouldn't start this way, but sometimes I'll start by just being like, this is going to be really dark. Like I'm a massive bummer, just to like prepare you all.
just prepare yourself.
Yeah. But no, so this is algorithmic bias.
Okay.
We are seeing an increase, not really yet in education, but it's coming, of algorithms that are being used to aid in hiring decisions and in acceptance decisions. And basically, an algorithm is looking at a lot of data of what's worked previously at an institution, and it's using that data to make an informed prediction about what should work in the future, right? And so you deal with algorithms all the time. If you go onto Netflix and it says, we think you're going to like these 5 shows.
Because you watch this.
Yeah, because you watch these things, we'll think you like these things. Perfect.
Yep.
Here's the problem with that. These are big decisions, like who gets in, who doesn't, who gets hired, who doesn't. And what patterns it's finding in order to make its predictions can be really problematic. So, for example, you might think, okay, well, we want students who get good grades. That seems like a reasonable thing to say. So, look at applications of previous kids who got really good grades. Find patterns in the sort of applications they submitted, and look for those same kind of patterns among the next crop of applicants. What happens if the algorithm notices that like really kids with really good grades tend to come from like certain zip codes, right? And so what you've done is you've kind of calcified a problem, right? Or like created a groove, and that you might not even realize that that's what it's doing, right? And so certain states and certain cities, I think Illinois has a law for this, New York City has a law for this, to start requiring what are called bias audits for the vendors who sell this type of technology. A good kind of rule of thumb is to have what's called a human in the loop, which just means that no major decision is made entirely by like an algorithm, right? But this worries me quite a bit, because I think we love the idea of a kind of perfect solution to really hard problems that can be automated for us by really complex algorithms sold to us by guys in black turtlenecks in Silicon Valley. Like, oh, hey, this really hard thing you have to do, don't worry, it's 2025, the future has arrived. Like the algorithm will make the perfect decision for you. We might not fully recognize where it's making what data it's pulling in to make its decisions, and it could reinforce certain biases that are super problematic. I'll give you just like one quick example that went viral a couple of years ago. There was, those like soap dispensers you put your hand underneath and the soap comes out? I do,
and I think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
Yeah, so who did they train? Like, how did they train that model to recognize a hand? Well, it's like if you use like 80% or 90% white hands, it's going to have a harder time like finding a hand
brown
of color,
hands,
right? And so that's maybe like a silly example, but you can imagine how the same process, when applied to much bigger life-changing decisions that schools are involved in, could start to get really problematic really fast.
Yeah,
And we're not
exponentially.
trained on this in schools. Most people don't know what algorithmic bias is,
Never heard of
but
it.
might be very quick to reach for a solution that seems like fantastic.
Yeah. So, you talk about education. And so, beyond the student education, we've got to make sure that we're taking steps to inform parents in the broader community, not only now about deep fakes, but this algorithm bias. Oh my gosh. I'm like,
Yeah.
the list is growing.
Mhm.
So, are there resources out there that could be helpful? We haven't really talked a lot about what you do and how you can be helpful. So,
Sure.
talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And I actually have parent resources that I'm happy
Okay.
to share with you. I don't know if there's a way to
That would be
post
awesome.
it, but
Yes,
I'm happy
there
to share
is.
those.
Yeah.
So the parent resources that I made, I think the first page of it's like a 3-pager thing because we don't want to
Okay.
overwhelm.
Sure.
Always thinking cognitive load, but it's here's some definitions because something like NCII, sextortion, like what is
All of
this?
that.
All new, right? So just defining some terms, explaining in really simple terms, how does this tend to show up in schools? When there are incidents, how does it usually happen?
Mhm.
Just so they have like the basic kind of
Basics.
foundational things. Then I have another page of just like, I think it's maybe 8 simple things you can do as a family to like protect your child online, right? Just like certain
Okay.
like privacy settings you want to be aware of, like little
Okay.
habits, just 8 concrete steps. And honestly, that doesn't inoculate.
Sure.
It doesn't inoculate the kid, but at least you're kind of taking some proactive steps to do something, right? It kind of puts them into an action posture.
Sure.
And then the third thing are conversation starters to have with your kid,
Wonderful.
and to like start that dialogue. And it
Okay.
could be something like that you see in the news, that you sort of ask them, what do you think about that? Like, and just kind of like meeting them where they are.
Mhm.
It's not kind of like, it doesn't have to be an awkward conversation. You don't have to be an AI expert to have it. But at least opening up that channel, because I think, like I said, the number one thing, and it's like the thing that like really breaks my heart is the shame that victims
Right.
of this feel, and they have done nothing wrong. And so the fact that the
Yeah.
number one thing over and over again that I hear from them is how ashamed they were. It's like they're going to need that communication channel with their parents in that moment.
Absolutely.
And so start building it.
Mhm.
So that resource I have, and I'd love to share it with your audience.
Absolutely. I think that'd be great. And I think our audience would really benefit from that.
Yeah.
So, Evan, go ahead. This has been an amazing, eye opening conversation for me, and I know for our audience as well. And so, as we wrap up today, what sort of takeaways or what couple of things would you kind of summarize as tools for
Yeah.
schools to think about as they are tackling these issues?
Sure. So one thing I would say is, and it kind of gets back to your question earlier about, well, what is it I actually do? Like, what's my job? I'm still kind of figuring that out myself. But I work with crisis management teams, risk management committees, called different things in different places. But we work through designing policy language. What are the preventative steps? What does an incident response protocol look like? And we work through a scenario step by step and sort of highlight what the pitfalls are, what the best practices are, and we start creating a plan.
Right.
And also working on the crisis communication side as well. But this gets to your other question about like, okay, well, what are the takeaways? What can schools do if they don't necessarily want to go that far? Because for certain schools, like they might not do a lot of tabletop exercises, and they might be looking and saying, well, we're not facing one crisis, we're facing 100. And so for us to devote a ton of time and resources to doing really in-depth work on this one issue feels disproportional when we know there are like 100 things that could go wrong.
Okay.
And so taking even just like a half step toward protecting students and towards preparing for this is better than nothing. By a mile, it's better than nothing, right? And so the number one thing that schools get tripped up on when an incident occurs, I would say, is that they, instead of getting into action, they debate whether or not real images, fake images, does our current sexual abuse policy cover this? You don't have time for a philosophical conversation.
Right.
And it is a betrayal of the students to not be doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is like protecting them.
Yeah.
And so I would say have an explicit policy for this. Have it in your handbook. It's now a felony. It's new, it's scary, we don't know a ton about it. I get all of that. Put it in your handbook. Talk to your general counsel about it. But I've heard some general counsel say that they're not sure they need it. Lawyers don't necessarily know a ton about this yet either. And having a JD does not necessarily make you infallible. You should have language for this.
Got it.
Again, like contractual law is the land of independent schools. We live in that world more than we do like constitutional world.
Right.
So yes, have that policy. Start thinking about, the supports that the student would need were it to occur. Outline what the consequences may be for a perpetrator. Think about where you're already doing education like this: media literacy, consent training, advisory time. Can you give a little bit of education on this and some awareness of this? Sometimes there's a concern of like, well, if we talk about it, then it's like we're
promoting it, right?
It's like you said, the toothpaste is out of
the tube. Yeah,
the tube. So like, it just doesn't work that way. They're terminally online. These kids, they know more about this stuff than we do. There are 100 AI tools that can undress their classmates. It's already out there. Adolescence was like the #1 show on Netflix. It was talked about the Student Union. There was a 60 Minutes on it. Like, it's out there now.
It is out there.
Yeah.
So awesome. This was so great, Evan. How can folks get in touch with you if they are interested in your services?
Yeah. So my email is evan@pathosgroup.ai, PATHOS. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Evan Harris, on LinkedIn.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, and we'll post these at the end of the podcast as well, so people have that information along with the resources for parents that you were so gracious to share with us.
Great.
So, oh my gosh, this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming on and giving us a real education about what's happening out there right now, which is so important for schools. And so hope that we'll maybe have you back again for some updates to see what's going on, to keep us abreast.
I'd love to come back in a year and say, we solved it.
In fact, I bet you're probably on an island somewhere because you probably made a lot of money after all of that. But no, absolutely love to have you back on. And so thanks for spending time with us today at the Dean's Roundtable podcast.
Yeah, and thank you, Bridget, for like shining a light on this. It means a lot.
No, absolutely. And so we thank our audience today. And if you like what you heard today and are interested in hearing more from the Dean's Roundtable podcast, we encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast series. For those of you leading the charge in student life, if you're ready to rediscover what made you fall in love with this work in the first place, join us at the Dean's Roundtable Annual Conference. During these 4 transformative days, you'll connect with fellow deans, share game-changing ideas, and walk away with practical strategies you can use right now. Head to deansroundtable.org to learn more. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Evan Harris, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by premiumbeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And as always, thanks again for listening.